Good day, people. We're talking about patient control. Okay, so patient control. Why are we talking about it? We're talking about it for two reasons. Number one, to look at essentially improving patient safety. So the more contact you have with the patient, the more control you have with the patient, the safer that patient is. The less likely injury is going to happen to them as an unintended result of treatment, the less likely they're going to fall off the table, the less likely you're going to have problems of any kind. Okay? You're also looking at improving patient outcome. So if you have more control over the patient, you're better able to localize motion, create motion in the desired direction so that motion is restored. Because in manual therapeutics, really what we're looking at is improving motion characteristics for the patient. They lack motion, we're trying to help them return to motion. So just as a beginning, as a primer before we move on to actual examples with a patient, we're just going to look at this pillow. Okay? If we look at this pillow and we think about controlling it, you see how I essentially have a vice grip on it right now, or I have a grip that is on two sides, and it's a broad grip on two sides. If I go ahead and I take one hand away and I attempt to continue holding on to it, I have to change what happens to my hand. Okay? I have to wrap around this. Now, as I wrap around this pillow to make sure that it doesn't fall, I've lost contact on one side, but I've essentially altered this contact so that from here, a flat palm, being able to control it, I've gone and I've increased my general contact area with the pillow. So although I've lost some contact on one side, I have contact on the other, and I've altered so that the pillow doesn't fall, stumbling over my words. If I go ahead and I decrease the amount of surface area that I have, say I go to a corner, now you see automatically when I grab that, so I go from here, the only motion that's going to happen when I have a nice broad contact, at least in this situation, is when my arm moves. Right? The pillow's going to go where my arm goes. I've got good contact, good control. Watch what happens when I go and I just grab only one corner. When I only grab one corner, I'm decreasing contact area, I'm decreasing control. Watch what happens to the pillow right when I do that. Pillow swings around. Okay? So there's a lot of uncontrolled surface area of the pillow. I can move my arm around, but the pillow's going to swing. Obviously, I'm going to try to exaggerate this, so this isn't necessarily what's going to happen to a patient, but it's just to demonstrate the basic concept. Broad contact area over as much of the patient as possible, or over anything, is going to create more control. Removing one portion of control, I alter my contact, so I have broad contact. Right? I alter it so that I'm still in as much contact as possible with this hand. Going to less contact, I have a problem. That this object, in the case of right now is a pillow, in the case of actual treatment would be a patient, is less controlled. I don't want a lack of control. I want my patient not only stable, I want them safe. It will help with outcomes, as I've already said, as far as treatment is concerned, but it'll also help keep them safe and keep yourself safe as a practitioner. So we'll move on to an actual demonstration with a patient. Okay. So what we're going to do now is just give a brief demonstration of the concept that contact is control and control is safety. So we already described this and showed this in general with a pillow, and what we're going to do is just look at this with a patient. Now our patient here is on his back in supine, which means that the largest possible portion of him is currently in contact with the table. This would be the same if he was in prone. What we're going to do is take a look. We're going to move our patient from here into a seated position to attempt to display that as we change the amount of contact surface that the patient has stable, in this case from the table, and we'll talk about this in our patient positioning series. Right? So the first concept of that being that the table makes stable. So he is very stable right now. He has a large amount of his body supported and contacted and controlled. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our patient in seated, because that's essentially overall the place where without a practitioner the patient has the least amount of their body in contact with somebody that can control them. So we're just going to have you sit up and face towards that way. Okay, so you can see that the entirety of his back, the majority of the back of his legs, is now no longer in contact with the table. Right? So the back of his hamstrings or the back of his thigh, however you want to classify it, is now in contact with the table, but the rest of his body is not. So our patient is quite free to move all over the place. Okay, so now you can see if I was being careless, I could very easily lose control of the patient. So we talked about this, the surface area in contact with the patient is what controls them. So the table can do that for us, or our body can do that for us. So we talked about two hands being in contact with the pillow versus one hand and how I would have to change that. So the easiest way to increase contact surface with the patient, control contact surface, would be simply for me to place my abdomen on the patient's back. And then I have hands on his shoulders, I can control them quite well, keep them very safe. Take them wherever we need to take them within the limitations of my capacity to move, because I can only go so far and I run into the table. Now, the concept of taking one hand off and still maintaining as much possible contact surface can be demonstrated by me coming to this side of the patient so it's visible. So I have a large amount of contact, or a large amount of my body in contact with the patient when I'm behind him. Now I just move over here, so it's essentially like with the pillow, I took one hand off. Now I've taken one hand off, but I can still maintain with my abdomen a large amount of contact with the patient. And I can have contact here, okay? And I can still control the patient quite well, but not as well as if I was directly in contact with the patient's back with my abdomen. I'm now on his side, and I have a bit of an oblique angle. So I can do this. If I want to increase contact and increase control, I can grab his other shoulder, and now he's in more control. But I lose the capacity to create certain motions, okay? And we'll discuss all of these things and intricacies of it as we go on over time. But for now, it's just the concept with a patient, or displaying the concept with a patient, that good contact surface. So not only would this be like the example with the pillow of two hands right here, but I also have contact with my abdomen, so the patient is very well controlled. I can come over here, essentially taking one hand off, abdomen in contact, hand in contact, so that's like one hand on the pillow, but I can increase that. It's almost like one hand and kind of a portion of one finger would be on the other side if we were looking at the pillow, just to draw a similarity between the two examples. So that's just us displaying the concept that contact is control and control is safety, just a visual example.